Good point. I don't know.
Hello, hello. Does everyone want to get seated? So, hey everyone, lovely crowd today. Happy to see all of your beautiful faces. This is Svelte Society London at Future House again at on the 15th of August. So this is a good day in more than one ways. So yeah, of course, today's event is sponsored by all of you. So give yourself a round of applause. Thanks to everyone who donated, and thanks to Guild who continuously gives us payouts based on how many people have signed up for the event. In case you're sorry, so sign up for the event so we get more money. And obviously we are at Future House today. Just a quick shout out to Future House. It's a co-working space. You can sign up and hang out with a bunch of really cool people. There's one of the QR codes is there, and then there's QR codes all over the place. They also do regular meetups and stuff. So if you're into like learning about, I don't know, I think they do a lot of AI related stuff, but not in the way where it's all about like building generative AI application. It's more like actual, things you can do with it. So
I've been here on Friday. I highly recommend it.
yeah. They also do Saturn DIY where they build things like, so there's a display behind us right now, which is disabled. Yes, that one is built by them as well. And then there's a metro display sort of, so it gives the timings of all of the trains leaving from the nearby stations. So they just build stuff like that for fun. That's how programming was originally done. So it's quite fun. And yeah, emergency evacuation. So I've done this joke before, but the toilets are there in case of emergency evacuation. And then we've got actual doors on that side for leaving. I think that one's a fire door, and we always keep that open. So that's generally a good on safety. Keep calm and go in the correct direction. Svelte code of conduct. Everyone here obviously knows how important this is to us. All of us are repeat members of the Svelte community. Like we are here again after so many meetups, so we all know to follow the code of conduct. It's over there, obviously. In case of any issues, well, I think all of us are like pretty much core members. So reach out to one of us between each other in case you find some problems during the meetup or face some problems here. Yeah, agenda for this evening. Now to the important bits. Now that the admin bits are done. Firstly, of course, Scott Phillips is going to talk about prototyping tools or how Svelte is on the verge of a lot of other things. And then Kevin is going to speak about advanced animations as well, but that's the title that I made up. What's the actual title? Okay, we'll find out the actual title soon. Pretty cool. So now on to prototyping tools in Svelte. Do you want
I'm going to use this machine. Yeah.
Cool. So Scott's gonna use this machine. Let me stop my presentation. Oops. I think I just gotta, oop, that's not it. I'll remove this from here and then present my screen. Do you just want me to share that window?
If you just share the display,
The whole display.
that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
Thank you.
we are here for Infinite.
Just jump into Pindeck.
Yeah,
Perfect.
awesome. Can someone check on the stream whether it's visible? Like, oh, we're not.
I think mine is saying the live event will begin in 0 minutes 0 seconds, but it will get mine.
Are we streaming? Wait, it's saying the same on yours. Oh, it's fine.
No, that's mine.
Are you connected to the Wi-Fi or?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So you can get started. Do you want to change the zoom and stuff?
No, it's okay. Don't worry.
Yeah. Why is this?
I just want the green one.
Yeah, I don't know why my bookmarks bar is showing, but
You want to turn the bookmarks bar off?
it's up to you.
Yeah, that's pretty
I
reasonable.
think it's
So always show bookmarks bar. Always show the toolbar. Okay.
awesome. Thanks, Scott. Do you want this?
Sure. Why
I
not?
can't see the slides, however.
So if
Oh, wait,
yeah,
sorry.
Okay.
I need to.
Then again, mine is very handy.
You can't see this display on the
No,
stream.
no, I'm seeing a better thing.
Um,
Not the worst thing, but
Okay. So,
cool. Now it should be fine.
So in actual fact, I will take this opportunity to say. Good evening. If you want to jump onto Pindeck, me, then you can immediately just jump onto the links, because very specifically, I've noticed that at Svelte meetups, we do a lot of unplugging and plugging in displays of other machines. And I just thought, this looks like exactly the kind of problem that Svelte is ideal for fixing. So what I did was I built a prototype tool to prove it. Essentially, I've been working in prototyping for like 20 years. But specifically, I put the mangroves on here because if anybody's aware of the mangroves out in the Philippines, it's marine meets terrestrial water life, and it's incredibly abundant for biodiversity. And I really kind of imagine that Svelte is very, very similar. It's a similar kind of like a verge, like a boundary area. So my job is UX by the laptop. You'll have to stand over here where the thing is on. Is it working now? Let's go back to mangroves. So you'll notice that on your phone, if you've loaded it, I'm actually able to control the slide that you're on. And I'm hoping that, we can maybe open source this and we can hack a little bit more code into the platform. Yeah, go on.
do you have like a URL? or-
Yeah, I'll do it later.
No, just below Pindeck.
Sorry, yeah, Pindeck .me. I should have put the .me on there. This is a bit of a rush. I had to rewrite part of it.
There we go.
So I will explain in a second. So hopefully now, as we're tracking through the slides, you'll be able to fire up the code and you can have a look at the code on your own laptop or on your own phone. So yeah, I really see that Svelte is like kind of a bit of an amazing ecosystem. And I feel quite kind of well placed to say that because I've been very fortunate to work in lots of different areas over 20 years, like 3D graphics and in games and in print and working for CRM businesses and working for travel agents and all of these different things. And I keep reflecting on the fact that Svelte is continually useful to me. So what does a UXer do? You can well imagine that it's incredibly glamorous, and I interview rich people all the time and drink wine. If that was true, I probably would do a much, much different presentation, because the reality is it's actually like quite problematic, I think, for the industry that people, UXers, generally kind of get airdropped in when client projects are making customers cry and they can't stop it. And that's basically like, when they get a UXer in. So just really briefly, I don't know whether you're aware that, kind of UXers do many different things, wearing many different hats, like, for example, A/B testing and looking at analytics and those kind of things. I'm probably like on the verge, a little bit more than others because I'm quite technical. I like to program as well. So this, I think, is particularly interesting because this is like a process, and it turns out that any project goes through these 4 phases. So, for example, as you're discovering an idea, then the scope grows and it gets bigger, and then you start to collapse down exactly what it is that you're doing. So you actually define something that you're going to do, and then you start to actually kind of like grow that amount of work as you're developing it, and then eventually it kind of collapses right down into the delivery. And iterative development always works like this. This was discovered by the UK Design Council, and if you want to learn more about that, I really recommend that you do, because very specifically, it can help you avoid the dip. And I'm sure you know what I mean, like when you're working on a tough project and everything's like totally mental and everybody's like, getting depressed because it's not going well. This can kind of help you really interpret where you are inside of a process. Another thing that UXers do is actual kind of like production. So for example, this color scheme here is, I suppose I kind of discovered it. I happened to be with a few people that had color blindness for a client project. So can you see, you're colorblind, right? Can you see the different shades here in the swatches?
Oxford and Arial are not the same for me.
They're very similar to you. Okay, very interesting. But all of the others are distinctively different shades, more or less. Okay. So yeah, the idea here was to try and capture a value that is going to be a little bit red, but kind of blue enough so that it has lots of contrast. And obviously yellow, you can imagine that working with black. And there's other colors which I've kind of added to the palette, which make, basically very rich designs. But it also means that I don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to defining a color palette. So for example, if you look at Svelte, or if you look at any of the other kind of UI libraries, they'll all have predetermined colors. And what I discovered was, at the time, in 2016, really like Bootstrap was like, any kind of thing. And for various different reasons, there was a whole bunch of UX improvements that I kind of wrote specifically as classes. And I then started to kind of save them with Tachyon CSS. Has anybody come across Tachyons? Okay, so if you think about like Daisy UI and then kind of pairing that up with Tailwind, right? Before those things kind of really took off, there was this kind of intermediary, which was essentially just like classes that were very, very thoughtful and much more simple, much more crude than what we have now. But because I was adding to it, basically I still use it. And obviously for prototyping, it's enough, because usually what happens is these businesses kind of run with what it is that I've built, and then they add whatever it is, more detail that they want. So something else that UX people do is actually lay out information. I think that we underestimate laying out information. You've basically got a bunch of rows and columns, when you think about what your divs really look like. In my experience, I think I've met a few developers that can actually benefit from really good layout. So this is essentially a closely guarded secret in graphic design. Village canon is like the way that the original Bibles were written by the scribes. And what they did was they had a very, very complex kind of mathematical system that underlined the...
Yeah, sorry, you can repeat the question into the mic, but my question is, can you go into more detail about what that is as well, like what Village canon actually is?
Yeah, sure. So Village canon very specifically is like a mathematical system that these monks and scribes had kind of codified over the years so that when they wrote script into these Bibles, the original Bibles, all of the texts look very similar from one scribe to the next. And essentially, that underlying template, which is, kind of, this big secret back in the day when nobody could write, essentially what it is like a 9x9 grid. So it turns out that if you take a sheet of A4 and you map it out into a 9x9 grid, these two boxes here, when you actually put two side by side, these are exactly 11 words across. And if you don't understand how profound that is, 11 words is basically the most harmonious and elegant kind of reading distance. Too short and your eyes basically do too much stretching and the muscles basically get tired. And any longer than that, and you actually get fatigued because you've been overstretched. So 11 words, and it's codified in Villard's canon. So I can show you an example kind of in the wild, right? So you can see there that I'm a graphic designer, so of course I've broken a grid. You can see like pieces kind of exploding out. But perhaps with a little bit of imagination, you can imagine that a whole marketing document with this underlying grid, it looks incredibly uniform. It looks very polished. So what does that mean to you guys? Well, it's actually possible to print it. So what that means is that anytime that you are or aren't working with a designer, you can absolutely guarantee that stuff is going to look perfect. So think about how you would use, I don't know where this happened. Think about how you would use your CSS, whatever it is that's your favorite, maybe grid or maybe something like Flexbox or what have you. Break it down into 9x9. Make the margin 0, and you can then replicate, basically what was previously a closely guarded secret. Remember, 11 words is key here, right? That's what you're aiming for. Okay, but how does this link to Svelte? I've used Svelte a lot. Probably I don't have a project that has like 700 components like Andrew Green, but I think I've probably written, about 700 components, something like that. They're all like spread over separate projects. But I've discovered something. Svelte itself is for preparation work. And Svelte Kit is actually for essentially audiences, for scale. So what do we mean by scale? Okay, let's clear the link and find out. So you can see here, this is like a typical component that I would write. So I love stores, by the way. I think probably like abusing this thing here, but you need a bit more. Oh, okay, that is fair. Let's do another few of these. Of course, like your keyboard shortcuts are totally different to mine. Yeah. Of course they are. Okay. So the most interesting part, I think, probably about this code is this here. If anybody kind of guesses what that does. So you can see here that Svelte is really perfect at this, okay? You can write incredibly rich components just in the REPL. And you'll also notice that actually in my component itself, there is really nothing else going on. There's like a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of rudimentary CSS here. But what you can do with this is, I don't know how, we haven't got the mouse wheel thing on here, I don't think, on Akash, but you've turned that off, have you? The mouse wheel on your... So, how do you use it? Okay, right.
Yeah, by pinching.
Okay, right. So on my Mac, I've got the wheel, so it's slightly different. It's very good to use other people's computer. You realise what an absolute hack you've made of your nice demo that was going to work perfectly. So yeah, essentially on a mouse wheel, like a conventional mouse wheel, you can basically use this loop and you can kind of make the circle bigger and smaller. So what I really specifically like about Svelte, when you're actually in the REPL, you have everything that you need to kind of build in a very, very stateless way. And I really think that this is like a major unsung hero in the whole, in the whole system. I mean, I don't know, maybe I missed that. So this is another one. I don't know if you see the chat GPT thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You see that? Okay. Willow was quite surprised how many components I put into the REPL. Sorry, I'm just gonna. I think the REPL is really like amazing. So what I did here was I just did like a quick GIF just to show you how I like to build stateless components. And this essentially is a whole app. And what it does is it consumes a piece of JSON and it automatically outputs a website, a web app. And then that will work with a service worker. And then the service worker will help you save it to the device. And I'm in the process of outputting 2,000 of these. And I've basically got an investor. It's a nice little summer project. We're quite optimistic about how much money we're going to make off each page, but if we probably make maybe a third of the money on each page, it should be worth doing, because the point is that this app here, it's essentially like an SEO template, and that's quite good because the AI situation at the moment is actually going quite well. Because what we can do is we can automate these things, and it's really easy because you can use Grok to output the content from unstructured data. So if we know something and we put together a unique text document, we can then send it over to Grok, and Grok can output really nice, clean JS open, and then we can drop that straight back into the thing that I built in the REPL with no other intervening technologies. It's then served by the service worker, and we have an app. And it's so fast to do it. Obviously, you need the data entry, which is like a separate conversation. So I've been experimenting quite a lot with AI, and this is really what I mean about just how incredibly useful I need to go and find it. Yeah, I actually had a different slide for this one, but down here is like the sweet spot. And I've tried loads of different AI to try and figure out like how we actually get JSON outputted in a really elegant way. So we can talk in more detail about this, maybe kind of in person if you're interested in AI specifically. But essentially what I've been doing is working with a mixture of experts on Grok to output that document that you've just seen. Occasionally I'll use kind of out-of-the-box Grok. The other one is more interesting, the one I've had. But then Perplexity and Claude are really, really good to do the other thing, over in the REPL, or maybe to help you kind of read it in Svelte. And then just, because it's quite good, it's not really like the others. All of the others are to do with like your IDEs, your process, getting kind of good, reasonable, efficacious code. Whereas ideogram in the middle, it's kind of slow. But if you don't know it already, it's really cool for making images. So for example, I've got a client that does like food delivery, and most of the time when they're delivering their hummus and bits and pieces, when they change their kind of price list, they never have any photography. So with I didn't actually use ideogram for that, but I used a very early image generator. But this one is cheap and free, and it's got like really good kind of free limits. But essentially, all of these different AIs, I've kind of very methodically gone through them. I've also gone through a bunch of UI component libraries as well. I don't have time to talk about that today, but yes, I put the slide in. And let's have a look. Yeah, one last thing that I would like to mention. When I originally built PinDeck, I went through like about 4 different ways to do real-time and pseudo real-time data handling, because you can see that I've basically done the whole talk just from the phone. But I basically had to rewrite it at the last minute because I ran out of the free tier on Vercel, and I was kind of surprised because I'd only really just got it to work. But yeah, there's a bunch of technologies here. Perhaps in another talk, because I've been thinking about making a computer game very similar. If you remember Sonic the Hedgehog, right? You know, like collecting rings. So I've been working with like the real-time thing as just like a proof of concept, because I can imagine kind of running around in a room like this, where everybody can see all of the rings in the room, and then as you take a ring with your mobile phone, we then save the fact that that ring is no longer available to anybody else kind of running around the room, or, you know, the sports track or whatever it might be. So, you know, perhaps if I finish that and I can get it really nice and stable for a few people to play it, I think that would be quite good. Like I said, I was actually experimenting with the real-time API, and that was what I came up against. This actually, again, thanks to Willow, is just the Pocket Base, which is how I tracked through this. So yeah, SvelteKit is for scale, and that's basically the app that I've been using for this startup where we're doing 2,000 pages. And really, Svelte is fine. Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Yes. Questions?
What did you end up using for the live?
Yeah.
You have to repeat the question.
So the question was from James, what did I end up using for live updates? So on here, I can show the screen. I actually typed in the pin number, and that then basically updates a Pocket host instance, and it is one number variable. So as I'm tracking through this, so for example, if I just scoot back down to the beginning, it doesn't work. So I haven't actually debounced the code particularly well. I haven't had time to test it. It's as simple as that. When I run out of the storage,
What are you using instead of?
I said Pocket Base. So I use Pocket Base, SQLite, served by whatever it is, Pocket host IO, which is why I think it's a bit slow. So the reason that I can't actually track kind of perfectly to it is because I think what's happening here is the actual bouncing code when I enter the numbers isn't quite as refined as it could be. I think I probably need to write a back-off algorithm on here. I think it will actually be very easy to improve. You know, it's basically just choosing a number and then the slide comes up. But what you should have found while we were actually playing it was, for example, if we go back to this one, the links should be kind of working there, essentially because all I did was just output a great big list of JSON, and then as soon as I change the number, it then just changes the display none, and then changes whichever is coming out of the JSON array. It's incredibly basic, which is how you're able to click on each one. If it wasn't a display none, if it was just the opacity, for example, you wouldn't be able to click on each of them. Yeah, so I also looked at Socket.io, setting up an Express server, and then I realized that actually I don't want to use an Express server as well as SvelteKit, because that's basically just like running 2 instances of a server, and that seems like a bit excessive when all that I actually want to do is basically just listen to a key burst, basically.
I use, if you're interested in how we look at it, I use PartyKit which is built on Cloudflare's new, they have like a live object.
Is it webhooks?
No, it's not webhooks. It's WebSockets. It's live.
It's live.
Yeah.
Excellent.
No, it's the same
And-
thing you did.
And is it actually like kind of easy in the way that Socket on Air is just easy to set up?
I set it up in like a day,
A day.
maybe a day and a half. But I
Okay.
built like the whole Pindex style in maybe 3 days.
Yeah.
4
This
days.
was the same. It was very, very simple. I mean, at the end of the day, it's changing one variable, but the reason that I got frustrated with it was I actually ended up kind of like investigating the same problem 4 times. So I did it with Express, and then I did it with webhooks and Socket.io, and then I did it with Vercel storage on, you know, whatever it is, Vercel key value storage, and I ran out of the Redis instance, and then I ended up doing it on the Pocket host because I think it's just the most kind of like crude solution, I think. But I will look it up. Anybody else got any other questions? Perhaps about AI or UX or why I chose yellow?
It's a site. I like to use yellow.
Why Grok or like any other agents?
Yeah, that actually is like where the chef kiss came from, because that thing is legitimately nuts. It's really crazy what they're up to there. So down here, where it's basically like fast and accurate, this is a bit more difficult to set up, and then this is really easy to set up. And if you look at what Grok are actually doing, they're basically using TPU architecture instead of using GPU architecture, or, you know, like whatever Google are using, which is like TPU architecture. So if you are aware of how the AI outputs the stream, so let's say you jump on ChatGPT, or you jump on Bing, or you jump on Perplexity or Claude, and it starts outputting that stream. All of that basically is really kind of coming from some kind of parallel processing on a GPU. But what Grok have actually done is they have, in fact, about 10 years ago, they actually came up with this kind of streaming architecture that didn't have the kind of latency, didn't have the paging and all of the kind of like memory problems that you actually have with kind of conventional, I mean, like H1s and A1s, so when I'm saying that they're conventional, they're very, very high tech, but for all intents and purposes, they still have this kind of latency problem of you're running on a network, even though it's fiber optic, and you actually have to page all of the data for it to then be processed. And then once it's been paged, you then have to wait until it's empty to then kind of refill that. And then you've got like network latency, you've got to page it again. You know, yes, they're very fast, but essentially what a LPU does, which is a language processing unit, which is the thing that they invented 10 years ago. They had no use for it 10 years ago because LLMs weren't invented. They basically just had this bottleneck-free, infinitely scalable parallel processor. So what does that mean to like normal people? That basically means that when you send a stream, so if you imagine like, you know, a big dictionary or some kind of big index, like for example, if you're familiar with Python or something like that, you just, you know, you blitz something to the screen perhaps. So what that's doing is it's going through the CPU and it's just processing one value at a time. And what these guys did was kind of like the polar opposite of that, like put all of that into parallel rather than in series. Okay. So the LPU now has just found a home in just being really effective at being able to process tokens. So we know that like tokens aren't a letter, like tokens are just kind of a substitute for an idea, if you like, in an LLM. Okay. So for example, I think the longest token that was ever discovered was something like solid gold magic card. So that would be processed as quickly in an LPU as it and for, you know, very kind of like small tokens. And the reason that it's so interesting is because when you take away the paging and when you take away the network bandwidth, what you're able to do is essentially kind of like lit into the screen, where it's just like a permanent stream of data without any latency whatsoever. That's basically how it's processing the output of the LLM. So that means that the inference speed is tens of times the speed of the state of the art that you would have got from a GPU, even the top-end GPUs, and especially the kind of TPUs, the stuff that Google's been using because they're like arts at the moment with that kit. So these guys are actually set up by a guy called Chimoff, who's like one of these kind of Silicon Valley kind of like these evil Silicon Valley kind of investors, they're friends of Donald Trump and all that kind of stuff, right? They're friends with Elon Musk, okay? So if you look at their podcast, the All In podcast, they regularly talk about Grok and some of their milestones. So I really early on got into their alpha program, and I've been noodling away on it for a while, which is how I got this thing here, which essentially is like a super basic version of LangChain, right? So instead of having, connect the dots with all of this kind of Python code, which honestly is just not worth it in my experience. This is basically just like, okay, why don't we just chain together a bunch of language models and you bring your own? And as soon as you bring in your own and they're not running on a GPU and you don't have latency, what you're then able to do is iterate very, very quickly on the actual underlying logic, the prompt engineering, the kind of what I like to call syntax control, to be able to really kind of like, boil down some really interesting elucidations to actually kind of converse with the AI. And you can do it incredibly fast. And you can basically have 5 of these things all corroborating their work. So you can basically say, for example, in the demo that I did here, take a piece of unstructured data, take out all the garbage, delete it, give me a list of all of the good stuff. The good stuff is from a template piece of JSON, but ignore the content in that, just focus on the keys. And then you send over to another one, you basically you intimate on that kind of little prompt for that particular AI. Only concentrate on inserting that content from that unstructured document into the actual values. And then you get one, let's say Llama, which is pretty good, or you get ChatGPT 4.0, which is pretty good. To then take those 3 or 4 models that you've had, and that's basically how this one is working. If I can find the slide. So this is the kind of screenshot that I did of my Mac, and then I just turned it into a horror looking JPEG for speed, because I had to do something so fast. I didn't put videos in this. So yeah, what that's doing is it's basically just chatting with a bunch of models and then corroborating between them. And that's how you leverage TPU, the LPU, the language processing unit from Grok.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay.
Yeah, let's clap for Scott. So yeah, that was an awesome talk. I wanted to learn more about Scott's project for a little while, so that was an awesome way to get to know more about that. Let's take a quick 7-minute break because the pizza's here, and I know that we've all been sitting and we didn't want to interrupt the talk. So now is your chance to interrupt the talks. Have some pizza. Hey everyone, so just introducing Kevin here to the stream. We're waiting for people to get back to their seats. So, yes, people are back to their seats. I think you just need to go back to where you were previously. No, it's fine. You're already sharing. Cool. So the talk is called Forbidden Animation. Give it away for Kevin. Goodly. Do you want to introduce yourself, Kevin, and like talk about where the name comes from as well?
We'll get to that. Okay, hi, my name is Kevin Doty, and I'm here to talk about low-level user interface animation. Very low budget following Scott's talk. Oh, there we go.
How do you pronounce that?
I pronounce it Doty. Okay, let me hide this. So the animation pattern I want to talk about is I call it relative animation, but you might understand it as the older sibling of flip. It's not working.
It's not. I think so. Okay,
Oh.
I think it's just taking
Okay,
some time.
it worked.
Okay.
Thank you. The older sibling animation pattern to flip, which you might also understand it as additive flip. And also, before I begin, I want to, slides aren't working. I'm not sure why this isn't happening.
I think it's just on the delay, maybe.
On a delay.
Might be. I think.
Maybe if I don't have to do it full screen. Oh,
Yeah,
do
I think-
have to do it full screen.
Yeah, I think it's. Oh, you have to do it full screen.
Well, would you hold this?
Yeah.
Okay. I have to quickly edit this. What do we see? Is it working? It's working. Okay. Anyway, flip is synonymous on the web for animation, and I think relative animation
You should continue. You should continue.
be well known. Discrete, not this discrete, but discrete as in not continuous, is an important concept. The animation pattern that I'm going to talk about only needs discrete values, not animated values. And this word is actually difficult for native English speakers, just so we're clear, I'm going to be saying it a lot. And I've implemented this pattern in a couple browsers, and this is the best line of code I ever wrote. And we'll see why. So you take two GL triangles, make a square, and instead of drawing a texture on it of a brick wall or a stone wall, you add a user interface element, and you can shuffle it around really, really fast. And that's what Apple did, but way before the iPhone, starting in 10.4 with CG Layer, but then 10.5 before the iPhone with core animation. And core animation actually begat CSS transitions and CSS animations. It has, well, CSS transitions are implicit animation in core animation. CSS animations are explicit animations in core animation. And core animation also makes it very easy to get animated values or discrete values. It has separate layers, the model layer and the presentation layer, which is absent in the web, which is unfortunate. But I'm going to dive right into the old school way of drawing. In all of my examples, I'm animating from 1 to 10. And back in the day, one would just rapidly update state and draw in a tight loop, like request animation frame, and even sometimes not even using a timing function. And a brief aside, forward filling animation is very common on the web, Flash and GreenSock. Layout is performed by the animations themselves, animation objects, which override property values and persist. And that's not the best for user interface animation. Yeah, it could be a physics sim or spring animation, but I think the user interface is better suited for, well, the web. You should be laying out with CSS and animating relative to that. Okay, so the way Flip does it, synonymous for animation. I'm hoping everyone is familiar with Flip animation by Paul Lewis. You set the property value to 10, and then you animate, as he calls it, first, last, inverse. I call it relative conversion of values. You set it instantly to 10, and you animate the old value 1 minus the new value 10 is -9, and you animate to 0, which takes you back to where you started. Oops. So when the animation is done, there's no more work to do. But Flip only works with transforms, and it's conceptually similar to additive, but there's only one. So my issue with Flip is, and with core animation implicit behavior, is how it handles retargeting. So in this example, we're animating from 1 to 10, and say midway through the animation, you replace an existing animation with a new one that begins where the previous left off. And it causes an asymmetry. The duration is the same, but the distance traveled, the reverse direction is shorter. So the animation abruptly stops, and it feels kind of sluggish because of that asymmetry. Same as core animation. Core animation has additive animation, but they were doing it wrong. And well, the expected pattern was to start at 0 instead of ending at 0, to be able to run multiple animations simultaneously. So here we have midway through a second animation starting at 0, and you can see it adds together. On top, the yellow square is the discrete property value, and then the purple circles represent the animated value, and pink is the timing function. And down at the bottom, the green squircle is the what the user sees. So it's not good for user interface animation because they are memory leaks. You can't just keep on piling on these additive animations with fill nodes and just expect to leave them there. It's just not going to work. So with relative animation, relative conversion, you subtract the new value from the old, and I say 0, but that could be the identity matrix, or for scaling, addition, I guess, is multiplication, so it's 1. So just like flip, you set the destination value and add a translation animation from, here in this example, -9 to 0. It puts the animated object back to where it came from. And when finished, there's no work to be done. And that's a big theme. And the way relative animation handles retargeting is superior to flip. Existing animations run to completion, and new ones get added on top, fire and forget. So in this example, we're interrupting and retargeting, but we're not removing the animation. And instead, we're adding a new animation, setting the property value at the same time. And if you add these values together, the property value in yellow, the two animations in purple, you get the green squircle. That's what the user sees. And so when the first animation finishes, it can just be removed. And it's seamless. The W3C has a solution in CSS transitions level 1, 3.1 faster reversing, and I'm not a fan. It only works for 2 states, and relative animation works for an arbitrary number of states. And they say it's jarring. Actually, it's an improvement over the typical, the implicit layer animation, encore animation, and flip behavior. But it's still not optimal. And so let's take a look. This is what we've got. So in red, there's no animation. It's a little janky. And you can see the orange, the faster reversal in action compared to flip, which seems kind of sluggish on reversal. And CS animation and view transition, the view transition API, just completely obliterates state and starts anew. And the green one is relative animation built manually using the composite operation accumulate. And I manually do the relative conversion like one would do if they were animating flip. So since it's interruptible, you might be familiar with the linear timing function, which gives you these springs, but you can't interrupt them. And so if you just drag, it will continuously animate to the new value. So it is an emergent physics that sort of, it's kind of emulates spring physics.
Just to be absolutely clear, that's the one.
I'm sorry?
Just to be absolutely clear, that is the one.
This is relative animation, not a spring, not a physics simulation. This is relative animation, and it's a transform. So it's running on the compositor or the GPU or a separate process. I'm not really even sure. It doesn't matter. What matters is it can be accelerated and optimized. This is a different timing function that's only possible with relative animation. Instead of using an easing, or instead of progress from 0 to 1 with the linear timing function, it's actually the progress from 1. It starts at 1 and extends beyond 1 using an Archimedean spiral. And there's no latency like you would get. So although there's latency in the web stream, but it actually pushes ahead of the cursor, and this would be good for dragging and only dragging. So we've got a ton of animations when you're interrupting. And so one technique that is common with relative animation is copying. And so in this example, I'm showing how you can split. I mean, it's very primitive looking, but this is the groundwork for something better, I think.
Sorry, can you explain what you're doing there?
What I'm doing is splitting a div and copying animations from one element to the new ones that get added. And it would be very, very hard to predict what the result of all these animations together would be. And so you copy them from one animation to the other. And it's kind of cumbersome, I have to admit. But it works. So it's been around since 2014. Apple introduced it not the way that I had hoped. As an addition to core animation, they added it to the UI view class methods. And the reason I'm showing this now is if you look at these two boxes, they both, at the bottom, there's a duration. And in each one, the duration is different. There's a 1 second duration on the left and a 0.4 second duration on the right. And that doesn't actually work that well. With relative animation, you need to keep the durations the same. If you don't, it'll shoot off to one direction. So you got to keep them the same. And also there's, I guess, a lot of bugs because no one really anticipated this pattern. So rotating around the y-axis was a bug. And opacity, there was a bug, but fortunately this works on the web. You can animate about the y-axis. And I don't know if Apple ever fixed it. You can't animate height, unfortunately, because it gets clipped. The W3C did not standardize this pattern, so it kind of fell through the woodwork. And here's another issue with relative animation I call spooky animation at a distance. Yeah, the animations don't get replaced. Information doesn't get destroyed. So if there's a stagger, and it's exaggerated here to show the effect, but it does kind of shoot up above. But I think it's very natural. So we're animating towards 0 to not do work, but it also, there's another possible type of animation primitive that I want to standardize. If you have a collection animation where given a sort function that returns 0 to establish identity, not equality. Typically sort functions sort items that are equal, but here we're establishing identity. And so if you have a collection A, B, C, and D, and you remove item C, it instantly becomes A, B, D after you subtract the item, but then you add it back, and so that becomes A, B, D, C, and then after sorting, you get A, B, C, and D, and then when the animation is done, there's no work to be done after that. So the collection, you don't have to, in a completion handler, deal with removing elements when the animation is done. And this was here the example. This is Svelte code. And you can see that the animations are interruptible. You can filter. Thank you, Scott.
Oh, that's all right.
So, sorry, Kevin, maybe you could explain this demo as well, like.
Yeah, we can dive into the code if there's time. So keyframes, yes, I'm talking a lot about primitive stuff that I want the W3C to implement for the web, but I mean, hopefully there's some stuff you can get out of it for Svelte. I hope. So relative conversion for keyframes, ABCD is A minus D, B minus D, C minus D, D minus D, and the last one becomes 0. And you see the effect, the helicopter is the keyframes, and they blend together. The rocket ship just speeds up. That's a different type. So this, I mean, I've got a long list of stuff that I want the W3C to implement. So if you have a friend that works at a giant multinational tech conglomerate, you should say, hey, let's implement this relative animation on the web. You know, write your NP and let's get this done. This is it. I've implemented many of these features in Firefox Nightly, although you have to download, or you have to compile it yourself and manually edit the source code. And the same is true for Chromium, but I've only implemented in Chromium composite operation. The first is the subtract operation should be added to CSS values 5. And composite operation is a web animations composite mode. They have replace, add, and accumulate. And I suggest we add blend. And that could be used for transitions, CSS transitions, CSS animations, and a new type of primitive discrete set animation.
Can I ask a question specifically about that?
Sure.
So if I was to use blend as your kind of explain.
Would you want to wait? Let's wait till the end. Let's wait till the end. I'm so sorry.
Would I be able to like move the browser window and still complete how it works?
I have no idea. Let's wait till the end. So transition composition. I'm so sorry. Transition composition blend would give you better interruption and retargeting behavior with care taken for when you change to and from that state. Animation composition blend would work very well with view transitions. There's a timing function. It's not just a vanity thing. It's symmetrical for seamlessly blending animations together. And so discrete state is really experimental and unfinished, but since you only need discrete values, not animated values, and the web, it just gives you animated values. You have for scrollable overflow, things like that. And with this mode, which breaks a lot of stuff and it's unfinished, it would give discrete values for get computed style and get bounding client rect, and would improve performance, I think. Because you're not doing any animation-only style calculations. And all animation would be handled by the accelerated composited properties. And there's a mixed fallback state, which would permit the discrete values, but does not have the same performance optimizations. And an alternate to that, which is much more realistic, would be get discrete style, but you're increasing the API surface. But that would be easy to implement. And get discrete rect would also be very easy to implement. And I want this discrete set. Would be great for node lists, view transition API, or JavaScript animation. And that is what it looks like in Firefox, the subtract operation. So I'm sorry, Scott, what was your question?
I think it can do it, but I imagine that if you have a container
A container, if I have a container,
and you were going to hide auto
height, animating height.
animate to hide auto. But if the container, before it was closed or before it was open, is to then change its height.
You're saying animate height auto.
Yes.
Right, so relative animation, I don't really know about that. I know they've recently added that, and then I guess people love it. But relative animation, if you're given an old value and you're given a new value, then you can perform the relative conversion and get the delta. But so I think it will work, but that it's orthogonal. I don't really understand what the problem is with the high auto. But if that can give a value for the old value and a new value, then it would work.
So what we could do is have like new animations for turning phones around, like having new animation for doing orientation on phones as well. Unlocks all of them.
I would like that, yes. I would like to animate this way for orientation change. I'm practicing my British English slang, and these are the geezers. Never mind the bollocks. And that's my talk. Oh, actually, I was going to show you some code, wasn't I? Would you like to see some code?
More animation, sorry.
Let's look at some code. Okay, actually, I use VS Code, but I'm too embarrassed. So I'm too embarrassed to use VS Code. So instead, I'm typing with one hand. Oops. Oh, I closed the wrong window. I'm so sorry.
Something about life for you.
Thank you.
The mic stand work.
Thank you. Okay, so sorry. Discrete values. So I have code, a little humble library called Cheapskate, and it lets you create a sibling animator. You pass in, you create it with a delegate object, and the delegate, it needs a sort function, which is here. I'm sorting by frequency, by stroke, count, and I'm filtering. And you take the sort function, and you also give it an easen, if you'd like, the spring, and you give it the duration. And so it works with Svelte, and in Preact, you implement a method set animated items, and it tells the developer when to set the animated items, which are, I'm not using runes. I'm not using runes. This is Svelte 4, because I'm new at Svelte still. But you pass down the animated items, you pass it down to the collection. And you loop through the animated items and you draw them. If you're familiar with Flip, you have to get the previous value, or you get the value before it changes and you get the value after it changes. And I accomplished that here in an after update. You tell, well, before anything, when it mounts, you tell the animator what the container element is. And so it can, you tell the animator what the container element is. So it handles that for you. Thank you. And then after the update, you tell it that the new DOM state is ready. And then you draw them. And I mean, that's it. And this is me drawing. Oops. I query the animator for these metrics. And that part is a little fidgety. I mean, I'm not too happy with that, but it works. And I don't know where it went. Well, I don't know where it is. There it is. This is the result.
That's actually animating the position directly.
Yeah, from the code that I showed you. It actually flickers in Firefox unacceptably.
But like, is it a CSS, like a transformation? So it's not CSS.
I'm using CSS transforms,
transforms.
but they're not animations or transitions. It's web. They're manually created web animations. I do the conversion, the relative conversion, which is easy if you're doing transforms. But if you wanted to have a library do that with every property and animate everything, it would take gobs and gobs of string parsing. And so it really needs to be standardized to make it easier. Oh, and also I have this chess app. I just want people to know that it's real, but I had to resort to manually manipulating the DOM. So, and the code's really sloppy, so I didn't share it. But you can see that you can.
And this is the same, you're manually calculating all the animation.
It's not janky on my laptop, but it is on the stream for some reason. So I had to manually manipulate the DOM because I mentioned earlier the animation copying. The pieces are nested inside the squares, which are divs. But because the pieces get removed and then added to a different element, the animations get destroyed. And so I had to resort to animation copying, which was actually poor for performance. So instead, I directly mutate the DOM so I don't have to copy the animations.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Yep, I didn't want to uneventfully kick Kevin off, but of course it was an amazing talk. And right now, unfortunately, we do have to head off because we have to get out of the building within time as well and clean up. So yeah, we are going to the Crooked Haddock or whatever it's called later, which is near the station. Yeah, the Cricket Billet. Yeah. And yeah, let's continue a conversation there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Who do we know to